Hey, how's it going everybody? Sinful Duck here, and welcome to another Wolcen video. Today I'm going to do my build update for the Occult Mage. Some of you have probably already seen the video. If not, I'll link it up in the cards. But I'll link to that video. It's a leveling build that I put together. So if you are still going through the campaign, kind of the leveling process, go check that video out and then come back to this later on when you're a little bit higher. But for those of you who are already kind of into the 60s, 70s range, stick around, take a look at this video. Again, this is my Occult Mage. It's based on Aether, Shadow, Sacred damage, so yeah, let's dive right in. Alright, so the first thing I want to take a look at here is going to be the attributes. A lot of people have asked about attributes in this game. And I got comments on the previous video asking about the attributes, and things have changed a little bit since that video in terms of the attributes. So what I've done here, you can see most of my points are pretty much all in wisdom. My wisdom is quite high. I do, however, have a few points into ferocity, but here's the idea behind it, is that we want to apply ailments and we want to be able to crit, because our ailments are not dot damage. It's not something like a burn or poison, anything like that. Our ailments are there to actually aid us in other ways. So we want to be able to apply those, but we still need our damage to be able to crit. So I want to make sure we're getting as many ailment stacks as possible. So we've got everything kind of dumped here into wisdom. You want to make sure, kind of my target here was to hit 50% ailment chance score. And as you can see, we're just above 51%, so we're doing real good there. And then for the crit, I want to make sure that I'm above at like 30% or higher for crit. And you can see we're at 36.6, so we're actually doing quite well there on the ferocity. All right, and moving on here, we're going to take a look at the gear now. So keep in mind, my gear right now is not at all optimized. It's not the greatest gear you can get for this build by any means. You can see most of it is actually yellow gear. I've only got a couple pieces of red gear, and even those aren't great. So there's lots of room for improvement in terms of the gear, but I'll show you kind of the important things that I'm looking for on each piece, and sort of why I stuck with what I've got. So this is primarily a force shield build. So we're stacking as much force shield as we can. And right now, you can see down here, we're at just about 80,000. With some minor upgrades, we can get that above 80 pretty easily. So here on the boots, we've got plus to wisdom, and we've got movement speed. Those two are very, very good. Kind of got lucky that we've got the occult damage, but it's got a good amount of force shield on it as well. So these boots actually are pretty good. They've got the move speed, the wisdom, occult damage. They've even got critical chance score, which is very nice. The pants, we're again using sorcerer pants, the arcane greaves, occult damage, willpower regen, very good. But we've got our flat stat there, which is ferocity on this one. Whether you've got ferocity, willpower, toughness, doesn't matter too much as long as you keep those stats we talked about earlier to the right levels. Just kind of get whatever you are able to here. But as you can see with our gems, we are going defensive 3 and putting in the max force shield gems. We want to go with double flat occult damage types on the belt. So we've got Aether and Sacred there, along with crit damage and transfer time. The Catalytic Strap, probably the best choice for this build in terms of just the different belt types. You could go, I can't remember which one is the utility belt, something like that. Whichever one, it's got the crit chance. You could swap to that if you find a good one of those. I haven't. I've been kind of unlucky in my drops, so I don't. So all I've got is the 11% spell damage, which I believe even the 11% is still pretty low. Moving up to the chest piece. The chest piece is where things get very interesting for a force shield build. You can see the stats we have down at the bottom. They're okay. The 67 wisdom is pretty good. The willpower regen I like. Enough of that. Let's continue. So the chest This is where it gets interesting, is with the sockets. So as you can see, I've got 3 sockets. One of them is a defensive 3. We've got max force shield in there. The other 2 I left as defensive 2. So you can put force shield regen onto those. Now if we look at our force shield regen, we're getting over 42,000 per second. So once that delay is over and we start regenning, our shield is back super fast. Our shield comes back ridiculously quick. The gloves, we've got percent damage and wisdom on there, and again on this one, wisdom, and then ailment chance score. Those are very good ones to pick up. The shoulders, percent damage and toughness, some force shield regen, and then a big amount of ferocity there. So the shoulders actually have really good stats on them. 78 to each one is, for the gear that I've been seeing, that's actually pretty good. Helmet, again, sorcerer helmet, 80 ferocity, ailment chance, and a pretty good amount of force shield on there. All right, let's move into the jewelry here. We've got our amulet with again a double roll of occult damage, so we've got sacred shadow there, along with crit damage. Since we're not really focusing on resists at all in this build, I would recommend going with the steel ring because it'll help increase your damage. So the steel ring inherently gives you crit damage, and you can see this one gave us 28%. It also rolled an additional 19%, so very high amount of crit damage on this ring. You also want to make sure you get the double damage roll, so we've got fire and lightning on this one, along with crit chance, which is, I mean, this is an amazing rolled ring. Unfortunately, we are in a occult damage build, and rings cannot roll with anything but elemental damage, so that's a little unfortunate. Same thing over here. I got 30% crit chance, or crit damage on that, excuse me. Fire and frost, we got crit chance on there, and again, the casting speed I don't really care about in this build. And I believe the last item we've got here is the weapon. So again, with the weapon, you want I think you can get 3 flat damage types, but you want at least double. You need at least a double damage roll. I could be wrong about the triple as well, but we've got a double damage roll here. Sacred and Shadow, you definitely want occult damage types. Life Leech is very good. Unfortunately, mine is Life Leech from Fire, which doesn't really help me at all. And Elemental Ailment Chance also doesn't help me at all. This weapon, to be perfectly honest, this is a very bad weapon for this build. I need the Sacred and Shadow rolls that I've got, but I need Life Leech from spell damage. I need Occult Ailment Chance score, crit chance, something besides what I've got here. So I've got really only my flat damage rolls are any good on this. The gems. So ideally you want to get all 3 sockets to be offensive 2 so that you can add shadow damage to spells. I've been very unlucky and haven't been able to get 3 of those. I have gotten offensive 2 with a single offensive 3 several times, so I've just kind of stuck with it for now and gone with the shadow damage in the offensive 2s, as well as you can see, the crit damage in the offensive 3. Now, before we move on from the gear, I did want to bring up one thing. I got some questions in my previous video about how do you sustain the willpower in this build without having something to spend rage. And the answer to that is kind of twofold here. So the first part of it is that we're using a staff. So if you have to, you can auto attack. I don't recommend it. I don't do the auto attack, so you can use it, but forget about it. The reason we're using the staff, however, is for the transfer time reduction. So the staff gives you a 21% buff to your transfer time, whereas using a catalyst gives you a negative 50+% to your transfer time. So the transfer time is going to be very beneficial here. And then we're combining that with the sockets on all of our jewelry. Right here on the ring, you can see 25 willpower regen. These are amethyst, I believe. So 25 willpower regen, 23 willpower regen. I gotta upgrade that gem, but you get willpower regen here, you get it on this ring, you get it on your amulet. Basically, any spot that rolls a support socket, you do willpower regen. And while that doesn't stop you from running out if you cast a bunch of spells, it does help it come back very quickly. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into the skills here, and I'm gonna do this briefly. I'll put a link down below to a Wolcen-Universe build. You can kind of look at this a little more in depth if you need to, or you can just pause the video here. But our first skill here is Anomaly. I'm taking this whole diagonal row here because I feel like those are the most important. They're damaged when they're pulled in. It pulls in multiple times, and you can cast it twice. This one I took to increase the duration just because I like that, especially once you get to higher levels, into the higher tiers of expeditions. You're gonna want that to last a little longer, just keep dealing more damage, or if nothing else, just a little additional CC. Alright, next one up here is Plague Burst. We're using this mainly for, you can use it against bosses if you're able to drag a bunch of enemies into the boss room, or drag the boss out to where the enemies are. I'm sure you guys have already seen build videos about the explosive builds that people are doing. This kind of ties into that and works the same way. I would definitely say the most important node is going to be Noxious Smog, to leave the cloud behind. That's actually how you're going to get a lot of damage done to bosses, is if you drag them into an area where you've killed enemies. Even if the enemies are gone, you can lock the boss down in this cloud, and they'll continue dealing it'll continue dealing damage. Moving on here to the tier of ethereal. Nobody will ever know how to truly pronounce this word, so I'm just gonna call it tier. So with the tier, the biggest one you're gonna want here is Stalactite Rain, which deals us damage over time instead of just dropping like a meteor. Now, I've seen a lot of people who will take this node and convert it from frost to fire, and you can certainly do that. It does change it to fire. It gives you the 10% average damage. It can also give you an additional stack of Immortal Offering, so it is beneficial. However, for me, playing this kind of build solo, I prefer not to take that, and I prefer to keep it as frost, because we have such high ailment chance that any enemies or any boss who is not unstoppable, look at that freeze chance. It's almost 55%. You're gonna get through that break bar really quickly. So for me, it's so much more beneficial to be able to CC enemies rather than a little bit higher damage. So yeah, I stick with frost. You feel free to do it however you want. If you want the additional Immortal Offering damage, go for it, but my recommendation for this setup is stick with frost. Aether Jump we have in here basically just for the movement. You're gonna want to make sure you pick up this one that allows you to recast it whenever you want for basically double cost each time you do it. You're also gonna want Time Paradox, which allows you to get out of crowd control effects. So anytime that you get stunned, frozen, anything like that, you just cast Aether Jump and it breaks you free. Next up is one of my favorite skills probably here, which is Solar Fall. These are the nodes that I've taken here, but the most important one you want to pick up is this one, Sunrise. The effect becomes static and you can just recast it to move it, so that allows you to cast it and not have to stand and channel it. So it totally changes the way that the skill plays, which is very, very good. It turns it from a skill that's kind of good to extremely useful. So you definitely have to get this node to make this skill worth taking. And finally is our Annihilation. This one is here for a couple of reasons. It's here as just sort of a spammable attack, something that we can drop all of our big AoEs and then just channel this one for additional damage. It's also there because we have a 57% stasis chance score, and stasis is very important, as well as curse, 54% there. But being able to stack both of those up is going to be very beneficial, and I'll show you why when we get into the passives. But these are what we've taken here. The beam piercing enemies, I would say, is a very important one for me. It helps with using this against packs or any group of monsters if you want to do that. Rather than only being able to hit one enemy, you can kind of stack up all your ailments on all of them. Not to mention, Annihilation does do some pretty decent damage, and I haven't actually gone out and used it yet, but in the patch, it actually just went live about an hour ago as of recording this. Annihilation got buffed, so I'm gonna go ahead and head out and check that out here pretty soon, but it was already doing some pretty good damage, so I'm very excited to see what they've done with it. Alright, this video is dragging on for a very long time here, so we're gonna get into the passive tree here, and I am really gonna go kind of quickly. You can go to the link below for the Wolcen-Universe build and look at this more in depth, but I want to talk about two things. I want to go over what I feel are the important nodes, and then I want to briefly talk about synergies in these nodes, because I've set this up in a way where they're, especially defensively, there's a few that work in combination together to make you very survivable. So let's dive into it here. I started out here in the Scholar Tree. Work your way up to Attrition Strategist, get that ailment chance score. Next, we go up into the Kabbalist Tree. We're grabbing Immortal Offering and Grievous Afflictions, which allows us to cast 2 ailment types at a time. We're also grabbing these 2 for the maximum stack bonus. And then up here into the Time Weaver, we're going over to Which Time Cannot Heal. This is going to double down on our damage. Now, this damage can't crit, which is unfortunate. One thing I haven't tried, which maybe I should, is if I pick up this, damage over time triggered with a critical hit deals critical damage. I have not tested to see if this node affects this. I don't think that it does. I don't think it does, but as of right now, this node doesn't crit. That's okay. It's still a ton of free damage. Again, we're picking up these 2 nodes right here for the max stacks, and we definitely want to make sure we pick up the 20% regen delay reduction there, and another 14 there. You can pick up this 14 as well if you want to, but we can get to that later. You definitely want to pick up Dire Juncture. This is a huge defensive node, and pick up the secondary node for it right there. But what this is going to do is bosses can quite easily one-shot you, and what this does is it breaks the damage up, so you're not taking all of it at once. Next, we kind of make this circle around this direction, and we come into the Abyssal Shaper. Now, for the Abyssal Shaper, there's 2 major nodes here that are crucial to this build. First being Occult Affliction. Your occult damage is increased for every curse stack an enemy has. So we picked up all of the nodes that increase the maximum stacks we can have. So we can get up to 30 stacks of curse on them. And if we're channeling our Annihilation, or if they're stuck in our anomaly, those curse stacks are going to build really quickly. So we're going to hit that 30 mark very fast. And once we hit that 30 mark, we're dealing 210% additional occult damage. So very, very good node there. Next, we're coming over here and grabbing the Masochistic Effigy. This is 100% worth it. If you're doing a Force Shield build, you really need to have this node. It's going to double your max Force Shield, and then grabbing this one gives you additional health as well. If you're wearing all sorcery gear, your max health isn't going to be very high anyway. So grabbing this, you're doubling your Force Shield at very little, if any, negative cost to yourself. So very important there. Then we're still traveling around here. You can stop off here, grab the Persistence Hunting, which is going to give you 25% damage against anybody who's affected by your stasis, which is going to be everyone you're attacking. So basically a free 25% damage node right there. Keep on coming around here until we get to the Warlock tree. The Warlock, we're grabbing the max willpower and rage. Damage over time hits your Force Shield instead of your health. That's very important. You want to make sure you get that. We're coming up here also into Faith Leech. This is one of the defensive nodes that pairs into our little combo of things we're doing here, so we'll come back to that. Then we're also coming up here into the Plaguebringer and grabbing the Undertaker node, which is going to give us the nice little green globes that will add 30% of our damage as poison. Now, it's not converting damage to poison, it's just giving you an additional 30% damage. All right, now let me talk about these synergies here for defenses. Now, I already mentioned that we've got Faith Leech. So this is going to make sure that our damage is refilling our shield. And we've got one that I didn't actually go over here. So back in the Scholar Tree, we've got Purifier's Will, which reduces your damage taken by 30% when your shield is full. Now, pair that up with Dire Juncture. Dire Juncture makes it so that as soon as an enemy hits you, you take 40% of their hit. So it's already, right off the bat, for the initial hit, it is a 60% damage reduction. Pair that down here with 30% damage reduction, and now you're reducing that initial hit by a huge amount. But then you're still going to take the remaining 60 that you avoided here, right? But it's on a delay, and pretty much most of the time, as long as you're attacking, during that delay, Faith Leech is going to refill your shield again, which allows Purifier's Will to come into play again. This is basically reducing damage on both portions of the Dire Juncture hit, as long as you're dealing damage. So this is super strong in combination with this and this. All right, and that was the build. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully it helps some of you guys out. If you do have any questions about it, or if you have any ideas of how I can make it better. Now, I am still looking, like I said, for better gear. I would love to get myself a trial belt if it'll ever drop for me, which it probably won't. But if you have any ideas as to how I can improve the build, let me know. I'm always down for some constructive criticism, any way to improve something, because I'm not the greatest at this. This is just what I've come up with here on my own, and I'm sharing it to try and help you guys out as well. So yeah, if it did help you guys out, please give this a thumbs up. It really helps out a lot, and consider subscribing to the channel for more Wolcen content. I will also be covering other ARPGs as well, so if you're into that, definitely subscribe. I'll be doing some Last Epoch, obviously more Wolcen. There's lots of Grim Dawn videos on the channel, so yeah, subscribe, give this a thumbs up, and until next time, guys, take it easy.